And we're back. It's an all new episode of News You Can Use, a podcast by PA Stands Up about Pennsylvania, people, power, and politics. I'm your host, Edwin. I go by he, they pronouns, and I'm Director of Narrative Strategy here at PASU.
And I'm Hannah, they, she, the digital organizer here at PA Stands Up. Welcome back, friends.
In America, most of us believe voters should pick our leaders. President Trump and his enablers want to keep people from voting so that they can control our elections and seize more power.
That's right. And from our deep canvassing conversations, we've heard that many Americans want every eligible voter to vote. And for every vote cast to be counted, we will decide our future and choose our leaders, not bow down to tyrannical monarchs or dictators.
Exactly. And it's because of this that we will ensure that the will of the people prevails. We have one message to anyone foolish enough to meddle in our elections: keep your hands off our votes.
And today, we're going to connect the dots on what we've been building together this year, what's at stake in the primaries and the midterms, and what the Trump administration is doing right now to try to block people from voting and to make it harder for our voices to be heard.
But before we do that, Hannah, let's give the people listening a quick rundown of what we've been doing this year.
So let's rewind to January, preparing for our statewide and chapter mass meetings. Folks came back together after the holidays and got clear about what 2026 will demand of all of us. We focused on regrounding ourselves, coming back stronger as member leaders, neighbors, and as a real organizing team.
And I don't know about you, Han, but it feels like a real reset, but not a slow one, more like, okay, we're back and we're moving and things are shaking.
Absolutely.
We got aligned on what we're fighting for. We started to set the pace early. In March, we held our member convening. That is where we were all about sharpening our skills, training our members on what needed to be won this year, and naming our collective states in this year's primaries and midterm elections. This is not just politics, but real life. Our families, our communities, our safety, and our future.
That's why it's so meaningful to all come together at the member convening. It's one of my favorite things. And we didn't stop at the big picture. We drilled down into campaign next steps.
Right. Because it's not just a plan, it's part of an organizing plan.
And in coalition spaces, we've been lobbying our elected officials to join our fight to raise $6 billion dollars for Pennsylvania through the Tax Billionaires Fund PA campaign. Because right now, Pennsylvania's tax system is upside down. Workers pay more and the wealthy pay less, if anything at all. And we can take the burden off of workers and raise revenue by increasing taxes on things like skyrocketing corporate profits.
Stocks, dividends, rental income, royalties, and inherited wealth. If our political leaders have the courage to make Yas and other billionaires and corporations pay their fair share, our state can be more resilient and self reliant, no matter how bad things happen in Washington get. And that's pretty bad at this point. We need a strategic plan to protect the most vulnerable in our communities, ensure that the Commonwealth can weather any storm.
And let's be clear about what that means. More revenue from fair taxes means Pennsylvania can invest in what makes life livable: safe housing, quality education, access to healthcare, and hope for our future.
So when we say our vote matters, it's not abstract. It connects to whether our communities get what they need to survive and thrive. And that's why the attacks on voting are attacks on all of us.
In case you haven't heard what's happening nationally, on Tuesday, March 31st, Trump signed an executive order aimed at stopping vote by mail. And let's call that what it is. When they can't win fairly, they try to shrink the electorate.
Right. Because they know that they are losing. They're trying to keep people from voting, then declaring themselves the winner. And that's not security, it's about control. Voting by mail helps working people, seniors, disabled voters, caregivers, and people who frankly can't afford to stand in line for hours because they are working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet.
And when vote by mail is attacked, it's our communities that pay the price. So the question isn't whether voting still matters. The question is, are we going to protect it like our future depends on it?
Because it does. We're joined now by Alicia, a member leader in our Lehigh Valley chapter. She's going to break down why it's important to vote this year and why voting is still one of the best ways to keep our communities safe.
Hey, Alicia. Thank you so much for being
Hannah, hey,
here.
Edwin. Thank you. Thank
Hey.
you for having me.
Of course. Let's start with your pronouns, your role, and your involvement with PA Stands Up.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Alicia. I use she, her pronouns. I am the comms lead for our Lehigh Valley chapter. I lead a very delightful team full of wonderful, incredible people. And yeah, I've been involved with Lehigh Valley Stands Up and by association, Pennsylvania Stands Up since 2020. It's been a long ride, but I don't know. I just like it. Here to stay.
And we appreciate you always, Alicia, and all the work that you do. And we're hoping that this is just going to be a really casual conversation because the midterms and everything is already stressful enough, but we just want to inform our listeners of like what we've been up to this year, and we'll just dive right on in. So, first
Yeah,
question
makes
for you,
sense.
Alicia. Mhm. Why is voting in 2026 especially important for Pennsylvania communities? And like, what's the difference about this year?
Well, as we all know, this is a midterm election, and currently we have a majority Republican House and Senate, which is a real bummer. So this is kind of our opportunity to try to flip that, to try to flip some seats, and there are a lot of flippable seats right now in Pennsylvania that are currently Republican and could be flipped Democrat. Of course, in general, every election is incredibly important.
Love that.
Especially to me, like the primaries are such important elections that so many people just are they don't know like how important they are. But like this is when you're at the polls in November and you're looking at your ballot and you're like, this is who I have, like that's my option. The primary is how you change that.
Exactly. Shout out May 19th. I know that we'll be at the polls, obviously. And that's often the difference, like you were saying, between a candidate who's an establishment Democrat or whatever versus a working class champion kind of person. So super important. Um, and when you say like, or when we say voting keeps our community safe, what do we mean by that? What changes when the wrong people get into power?
Well, so like the ways that especially like local offices can help um keep people safe is like they can pass protections for people. They can pass protections for the LGBTQ community. They can pass protections for immigrants. Like they can ensure that people with disabilities have rights and access to things as well. And when the wrong people get elected, um, they can take those things away, or they can not vote for them, or they can in fact make it much worse for people within those communities. Like we've had people run on a Democratic ticket and then vote against trans rights.
Yeah, that's exactly like you were saying, Alicia. It's really up to us to choose our like election. Who's going to protect our communities? Who's the best person for this job? And like really doing a deep dive on what their policies are. Because once they get to Harrisburg or once they get to Washington, it's really going to be them who's going to have the first say in how everyday people are going to be affected by these policies. And it's important for us to know exactly who we're voting for and how they're going to,
Okay.
you know, show up for us and champion us. Um, which leads
Yeah.
us into our next question. Uh, I don't know if you've heard yet or not, but recently Trump signed an executive order, which is basically trying to stop mail-in voting. So, like, what's your read on that? Like, what does it mean, and what should people be doing right now?
Uh, it means a whole lot of voter suppression. Like this is
Yeah,
going to severely limit um, a lot of voters from voting full stop. A lot of people for any reason need mail-in ballots. Maybe they can't take off work, which yes, that is supposed to be a protected right, but like whether or not people can actually take advantage of that, it's up in the air. People with disabilities, older people, people who can't drive, who are relying on our very, very poor public transportation system in the United States, and especially up here in the Lehigh Valley. God, I want a train so bad. but they won't if they can't get to the polls and vote in person. Like they rely on mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots to me also give you more time to actually do research on your candidates because, like I said, we had a Democratic candidate vote against trans rights. So, like, you have all these people that'll be outside the polls saying, "Oh yeah, vote for this person. They're totally progressive." And then they get into office and they're not. So having a mail-in ballot, you actually get to dig deeper, look at their experiences, look at what they've done. So if you take away access to that, you're taking away a lot of your ability to some of your ability to do that. Um, but yeah, this is direct voter suppression. It's going to really just really negatively impact um, all of these races because it's going to be so much harder for people to get out to the polls. I
Exactly.
do mail-in ballots myself.
Same, same, because I'm mostly working on, we work for a political organization, but that's our busiest time of the year is like we're out there talking to people, making sure that they have a voting plan, but we need to make sure that we have our voting plans in order. And if I didn't, if I didn't have access to mail-in ballots, I probably wouldn't be able to. I would be able to vote because that's the organization that we are, but it would just be a little bit harder for
Mhm.
me to be like, let me go ahead and take this time off and try to do it over my lunch break. Like that's just not feasible for most people. Um,
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, especially people working multiple jobs, people who are single parents, like, it is really hard to get there. And Alicia, I'm glad that you brought up like getting your ballot early, how that helps with name recognition. Like, people don't
Mhm.
always know who is running for some of especially those smaller, like, local offices until they see the ballot in front of them. Because sometimes it can be tough to find that information online, honestly, if you're not, like, actively involved. That is such a great point that I have not heard, people talk about enough, actually, and that can obviously open the door for having more conversations with the people in your life about those candidates after you're able to educate yourself. And I wanna be super clear with people too that in Pennsylvania, mail-in voting is still safe and legal. I would suggest to mail it by, like, 2, 3 weeks before election day. After that point, drop it in a drop box, if you can, but yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, and kind of talking about, yeah, how that would suppress folks. What are the biggest barriers that keep eligible voters from casting a ballot, and what are the simplest ways we can help somebody overcome those barriers?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what we've already touched on. It's, you know, people who literally just cannot make it out to the polls. Like you mentioned, Hannah, with people who maybe work two jobs or they're a single parent. Like how are they supposed to get out to a poll and physically cast a vote? So I think the biggest barrier that can be overcome pretty reasonably easily is transportation. If people don't drive or they can't drive or just aren't in a super walkable distance or they can't walk. Um, I know there are a lot like there's not only are there organizations that will organize rides that have numbers that you can call and you can get someone to drive you to the poll. Um, you can talk to your neighbors like, hey, if you know you're going out to the polls, say like talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. Maybe they're like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't have time," or like, "I don't think I can get over there." Be like, "Hey, I'll take you. Come with me. We can go together." And also talking to people who do have their mail-in ballots and kind of like you guys touched on, reinforcing like, "Hey, if we're only a couple weeks out from the election, you might want to get it dropped off." Um, it's safe. It's just safer that way. You can drop them off at your drop-in box until 8 p.m. on election day. Uh, y'all know with my ADHD brain, I have been right there in the evening on election day with my mail-in ballot, putting it in the drop box.
I'm like honestly same. can't can't say that I haven't been there. Um, I'm glad that you brought up like talking to your neighbors and like that just like clicked something in my brain as well. Like I've had conversations with some of my friends who are like, I didn't even know there was an election going on.
Yes.
Because it's hard out here for us working class people, and when you're working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet, like half the time, I know before like this job when I was still doing consulting, I would look up and be like, "Oh yeah, it's an election year. I should probably go vote." And then by the time I made that decision or knew about it, I was like, "Oh, voting registration has already closed. I'm not going to be able to vote this go around." Um, so I'm glad you
Yeah.
were talking about like talking to your neighbors. Super important.
Yeah, because I do actually think that, like, another big barrier to voting is just lack of information, like, lack
Yeah.
of knowledge. I remember, we were tabling one year at Music Fest, and we were asking people like, we were trying to get people to our table. It
Mhm.
was me and Ash Strange at the time.
Yeah.
Uh, we were trying to get people to our table by being like, "Hey, when's your next election?" And inevitably, like, I would say the majority of them were saying, like, the next presidential election. And so that's when we like, "There's an election twice a year, every year, maybe more than twice a year if you have a special election." And I think
Yeah.
people don't know that, and they don't also know the importance of these elections, especially with the primaries. They think, "Oh, I'll just vote in November," but it's like I said, if you want a better candidate on your ballot in November, you gotta vote in the primary too. That's how you choose them.
100%. 100%. And speaking like you just made something spark in my brain. I'm just thinking about for someone who feels like disillusioned, who thinks like my vote doesn't matter, what would you say to them to get them to be like, no, I'm going to make a plan to vote and show up?
Yeah, I think I would point out, how many elections there are where people win or lose by very, very few votes. People think, "Oh, well, if I don't vote, it doesn't matter, like, 'cause someone else is gonna vote." But it actually does come down to just a couple votes at the end of the day. And if more and more people are thinking, "Oh, well, someone else will do it," unfortunately, that starts adding up and that really affects the outcome of these races. I know we have a couple examples in the Lehigh Valley where that's happened. Um, I think one of them, when Enid Santiago was running against Pete Schweier in, I think, back in 2020. Sorry, y'all. It has been a long time. She lost by 55 votes. That's it.
That's crazy to think like 55 votes. That's like an
Mhm.
extra 55 people in your community that people could have like spoken to and be like, hey, come with me to the polls. So yeah, I totally hear what you're putting down of like, yeah, it's really important for us to show up because every vote really does count.
It really, really does. Yeah, your voice matters. And what you do, you influence your friends that way. Like, I
Yeah.
know my friend out in Reading has a hard time figuring out who are these candidates? Who am I voting for? So I actually always steer her to my sister chapter, Berks Stands Up, to see, check out their information. Like, who are the candidates they've endorsed? Um, so she can get that information. And this way she's not going, well, I don't know enough about it, so I don't think I'm going to vote. She's getting that knowledge.
100%. Shout out the Berks.
Yes, we love. And it's a really smart way to help folks get their local information, of course, is finding an organization who you align with. Still fact check them, even my friends, because I'm very sure that all three of us, we have friends texting us like, beyond like the day before election day, like, wait, who do I vote for? And I'm like, okay, here's who I'm voting for, but please double check that you want to vote for them. Okay. Like happy to provide you with any information that you need to do that. And Alicia, that reminded me, I know that Millersville had a really, really close mayoral election once, and there was a student running who almost won, which was crazy because when you think about that town and how many voters there are students, like that's fully possible. So it's
Yeah.
it's true that like all of our votes truly do add up. and make a difference, I'm wondering what are 3 things that folks can do this week to protect the vote and help somebody else get out to vote?
That's a great question. Oh man. Well, you can contact your representatives. You can contact literally any of your representatives. Um, and you can ask them to, hey, please protect my voting rights. Like, this is important. Um, that's something you can do. I know I've said talk to your neighbors like 500 times already, but literally, like, go out and talk to people. I've been canvassing a lot for our endorsed candidate, CC Gerlach, who's running for House District 22, which is my district. She's amazing. Um, I can't wait to vote for her. But anyway, while I've been canvassing, part of what we talk to people about is like, hey, what's your plan? Did you even know there's an election? Like, I always have the PA Voter Services website. Like, you can basically find out all of the information that you need on that website. This is not sponsored, y'all. I just really like this. No, kidding. So like if they're like, "Oh, I don't really like," if they say, "Yeah, I'm gonna go vote," it's like, "Hey, do you know where your polling place is?" They usually, if they don't, "Yeah, I'll look it up right now," and you get that information. You're like, "Hey, it's that church that's not right down the street from you. It's the government center. It's that weird building over there." Uh, and you can find out, like, you can help look people look up if they're registered, things like that.
Love that you're
Mhm.
doing this. That's such a good idea. I'm always posting like a meme on my story
Yeah.
around the registration deadline, um,
Mhm.
to, yeah, encourage everybody to do that. And like, if I make a voter guide for myself, which I often do, I'll send that
Mhm.
to, my local pals. Like, there are so many. You know what? Most of it comes down to, as you have been saying, Alicia, and all of us have said, talk to your neighbors
Mhm.
ultimately, whether it's through your socials or canvassing or through your group chat or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, talk to folks.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
actually Yeah, I also give a little voter guide to my local friends who aren't
Love.
involved.
Yeah, it's so important because, like we said, people are busy. It's really difficult to find this information if you don't know where to look, and I think that's
Yeah.
by design. Um, so I'm really happy that we're able to just point people in the right direction because super important to vote. Um, One thing I've been really thinking about this year specifically as we're thinking about our election defense plans for the general that's going to be coming up in November is like, how do we talk about voting as an act of care for our neighbors and not just like a personal choice? Because I'm thinking about some of my like immigrant neighbors who aren't able to vote, but they definitely still have a stake of like what's happening in our communities. So I'm wondering, like, how would you talk to people about like voting being an act of care?
I do usually try to connect it to their own self-interest, but
Mhm.
I'll talk about how, like, CC, for example, has passed like bills and ordinances that protect immigration rights and LGBTQ rights. I'll mention that I'm part of the LGBTQ community. Like, give them that immediate, like, oh yeah, this isn't just someone I don't know. This is a real person who needs that sort of care. And like, I know that housing is a concern for people regardless of if you are in secure housing or not, because what's happening around you will affect you. Yeah, sorry, I had such a good answer for this, Brett, and like
No, that was
it's
a
gone.
perfect answer. That was a perfect answer. Being able to link our like issues that we care about in our community back to like the voting block of like what we're doing right now is super important. And I love how you were able to be like, do you care about housing in your community? Then you should go out and vote because
Mhm.
it's really going to be the people that we're electing into office who I won't say will be the biggest change major makers in that space, but they'll definitely play a part of it. So, yeah,
Mhm.
definitely taking issues from your neighbors and friends that you know of and being able to be like, well, if you care about that, voting is the answer for a lot of this. Like, that's super, super powerful to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. Thank
Totally
you.
agree. And like I think about, my friends who can't vote for some reason or another and like
Mhm.
connect it back to them as well. Um and ultimately, like you said, Alicia, it does all lead back to your self-interest. Okay, Alicia. Sadly, all gorgeous and beautiful interviews must come to an end. So, if you could leave folks with one sentence for 2026, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say, I just really strongly encourage people to get involved in their local
Mhm.
community, their local political community. If you see or hear about a candidate that you like and you do the research and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, they've done the work. I really like what they're doing. I really like where they're going. Go volunteer for them. Like help them get through the primary and then get onto the ballot for the general and help them in the general. Like you can, there's always canvassing, which I know can sound like so scary going up to just a random door and talking to someone. But honestly, even as a really shy, anxious person, I've always had a good time outdoor knocking. You end up having great conversations. Almost no one sends you out alone, so you're just going with your friend, talking to people in the community. If you can't do that, you can phone bank, you can get a yard sign, or you can even just make a donation. Like all of these things are important. If you see, like, if there's a candidate um, that you just really support, like you want to help them because that's how we get that's how we get better people in office. A lot of the candidates that like PASU and LVSU supports are grassroots people. So you know, we gotta help them. We are part of their community. They're part of our community. So yeah, that's the very long sentence that I would leave people with in 2026.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Alicia. Really appreciate your time and thank you for letting us pepper you with all these different questions about why it's important to vote and, making a plan to do so because it's going to take all of us to make the change in our communities.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was so fun.
Yay,
Yay.
thanks, Alicia.
Thank you again, Alicia, for joining us. That's it for this month's news you can use. If you've enjoyed our show, please follow us and share with your friends and your enemies. And be sure to come back next month to hear about all things Pennsylvania, people, power, and politics. Until then, I'm your host, Edwin. And don't forget, Pennsylvania is for all of us. We'll see you in the streets.
This episode of News You Can Use was produced by Director of Narrative Strategy, Edwin Stubbs, and Digital Organizer, Hannah Hendershon. If you have any questions or topic suggestions, please email us at comms@pastandsup.org. See you next time.